Lori's not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's in Albany.
Yeah. I know the name. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, I mean,
What, we showered?
I'm not gonna present.
There goes an hour.
So you let. Don't get too excited. My presentations, I was trying to.
Next week, or next month, I'm asking for appreciation. No, by me.
Oh, good.
I don't know yet. I just want to stretch the meeting out.
Thank you for not taking the night the Vikings are on vacation, not taking this Monday night to do that. That's
I think
good.
that's the only one. I think that's a smart.
Go blue.
I'm good. How are you?
How are
I'm going back over here to my corner.
Okay, you go on your side. It's like middle school dancing, girls and boys.
The adults and the children on this side.
Right.
That's fine. I'm just seeing if I can find your shoes. You know what?
Oh, so it does have to be. No, I didn't know, I didn't realize you wanted, I just knew you said, yeah.
There's probably two that are live. They're mostly
Or you guys can meet in person and just zoom in. Want to do that? That'll work. So I got a picture.
You want me to zoom in?
On Saturday.
Okay.
Like you can't tell.
I get what you're saying.
It was the right one.
I don't want
Oh,
to be
only
out.
one person would send me.
Yep.
After tonight, that's gone.
I got lots.
She said she took a video because she was so close, so. Which is awesome. You have fun?
I'm gonna try and see if I can set it up for you.
What did I say? No fun?
You lose a lot.
That was parking, sir. Oh, no.
Yes, that's all I saw. That's all I saw in the emails.
Glenn, we're good to go?
We are, sir.
Good evening and welcome to the September meeting of the Grenville School District Board of Education. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all for being here in person and online. We've got some good commendations, a number of staff reports tonight with great updates on the school district, and we'll start with a roll call, please.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Wolf?
Here.
Ms. Deeds?
Here.
Ms. Shaw? Here. Ms. O'Day? Here.
Very good. First item is approval of our agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to
Approve the agenda? And
Second.
Thank you. Roll, please.
Ms. O'Day? Aye. Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye. Okay, we'll start with commendations.
Yes.
So good evening, everyone. Tonight we are recognizing a Granville High School student, Tessa Chiano, who is being recognized by the National Hispanic Recognition Program. This program was initiated in 1983 by the College Board to identify outstanding Hispanic high school students and to share information about these academically well-prepared students with institutions throughout the country. Each year, the NHRP identifies approximately 7,000 students, of highest scoring students nationwide from about 250,000 high school juniors who took the PSAT and the SQT and designated themselves as Hispanic. They then take that information and share it with four-year institutions around the country. This may give students an opportunity to hear from colleges that are particularly interested in communicating with prospective students of Hispanic heritage. And some of the universities award substantial scholarships to National Hispanic Scholars. Qualifications for recognition is based on the student's combined verbal and mathematic and writing skills score on the PSAT in the student's junior year of high school, and they must self-identify as Hispanic on the PSAT. Congratulations, Tessa. Well done for this outstanding achievement and recognition by the National Hispanic Recognition Program. Congratulations. And best of luck in the future. On all the other tests you have to take. All right, and that concludes commendations.
Great, well, we've got a good series of staff reports coming up. If you're interested in hearing about some board policy updates, our local report card, which has great news about Granville, is fine. If you would like to excuse yourself, you're welcome.
I gave you the free permission. Okay, so I am going to now queue up the board policy update. Over here, but I'll stand. Okay, just for everyone in the on the internet and in the room, every single year we update board policies, typically 2 or 3 times a year. OSBA is the Ohio School Boards Association, and we partner with them to put together board policy updates based on legal changes that have occurred, updates in legal cases, and cross-references. So tonight, we have a couple of different policy updates that I will walk you through. The first new policy that is being recommended, it's new, but it's based off of an old policy. So it's titled Relationships with Support Organizations, and if you see on the last slide, it says Relations with Booster Organizations. They've just broadened the definition of support organizations to include boosters, PTO, all the other support organizations within schools into one general policy about support organizations within the school district. So again, it references groups like booster groups, parent-teacher organizations, and other support organizations like the Granville Education Foundation would be another. So the policy almost reads similar to the one that we're rescinding. It's just changing rescinding. It's just changing the definition.
So there's no actual changes in policy at all, it's just a definition.
Yeah, it's slightly different language, but it's more definition. Okay. Next is in the area of emergency management. So every single year, they tend to update the emergency management and safety plan requirements, and they tend to update the list of things that need to be included, like acts of terror, infectious disease and pandemics were some recent changes. So it's just an additional listing of different ways that we have to be prepared. There are some other language changes, but they're more administrative and not necessarily material to the actual policy itself. Very much in line with current practice. College Credit Plus is a change in language in the eligibility definition, but it really just changes it from a 5-course description to the eligibility requirements that are associated with the institutions that we're partnering with. So it's a minor change. Interscholastic athletics talks a little bit about our affiliation with OHSAA. So it's programs regulated by OHSAA must also comply with all eligibility requirements established by the association. So it really is talking about eligibility and our affiliation with Ohio School Board or Ohio High School Athletics Association. And then there are some other components that have permissive language, and that won't be updated because our permissive language isn't changing. We still do not allow students that don't go to our school to participate unless they are homeschooled students from our attendance boundary. So that is not changing, although it is something that is a permissive language requirement within the policy. That's just the revised additional policies that are also related to those areas. And then you can see rescinding the relations with booster organizations, that will be replaced by support organization. Staff conduct, teaching about religion, and school ceremonies and observances are all legal reference updates. Nothing substantial or out of line with current practice. So they're just cross-reference and legal updates. And that is it for this round of policy updates. Are there any questions? Again, this is the first reading. Second reading will be in October, and we'll approve that list at that time.
I suppose it's good to have all of our support organizations in line with the same policy connections to us. I'm totally confident in the current status of all of our groups that support us, but what is the formal relationship from a policy perspective that we have to oversee, or how does that work? Is there a regular audit process or something along those lines, or are they essentially independent organizations?
There are, go ahead, do you want to answer? Because there's some of them are legal and some of them are just policy.
Yeah, so there's no audit process that we have over those support organizations. They're their own separate entities with their own federal tax ID number. They file their own reports with the IRS and the Attorney General's office and all those things. The policy basically outlines what they're required to give us each year. So provides a list of their officers and their financial reports and like those kinds of basic things, but it's not a true audit that we do each year. The year that we had a large volume of expenditures related to the athletic complex project, our auditors wanted to see more financials from the booster groups, and so we provided that to them at that time. But even that was just a review of their financial statements. It wasn't a true audit necessarily.
And then within their 501c3 status, they actually have to demonstrate how they support the support organization, because their requirement. Yeah, there's a requirement there as well in the creation of that. But it talks about, prior to operating a support organization, identifying derives from the school district or one of its school support organizations must receive approval from the board. The board's approval is contingent upon the organization compliance with some of the regulations that we require. So, just like giving us financials.
I just feel so great about our support organizations. They're such an important part of our district, and I want to make sure we're supporting them. And if there's anything from a policy perspective that we can facilitate for them, whatever, that's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, we are very lucky with the number, quality, and quantity of support organizations within Granville Schools, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Tanya Sherburne up next, who's going to do a facility update. We're flipping them just because she's next to the queue on the computer.
first, before I start on the facilities update, I just want to make sure that I thank the facilities department. We have a lot of great staff that work over there, work really hard throughout the summer, not just managing projects, but also cleaning our schools and doing some other work orders, anything from hanging whiteboards to, making repairs around the athletic complex. So I'd like to start off by thanking them for everything that they do all summer long. Well, I know you're wrong. So the first slide here shows a project that I think looks great, and you can see all across the district. We have some new signs, actually that match the high school sign that we did a couple of years ago in design. So I think these signs look very nice in our school buildings. We are adding an additional one over at the intermediate school that is on Loudon Street. So that should be coming soon to its home. Additional projects here that we've done over the summer were a lot of brick and mortar repairs. We also repairing some of this expansion joint and then the block glass at the gym at the high school. We had some broken windows, cracked and whatnot, so we replaced those. You can see the before pictures are at the top and the after pictures are at the bottom. And this is primarily in that alleyway back adjacent to the elementary school. So a lot of work to make it safer and of course the appearance look better.
And as our buildings age, and they are every single year, that will become more of a regular occurrence. That's something that when you have more facilities, they tend to erode, and you have to do that every so often to update the brick maintenance.
You may recall we did some at the high school, middle school last year.
If you don't stay on top of it, it gets worse.
Yes.
Yep. We did some asphalt and concrete repairs, seal coating, whatnot, throughout the district and the bus garage. On this slide, you will see a curb at the high school that we did. The inside of the curb is the teacher parking area, and the curb was really falling apart pretty badly. So it looks really nice. I know you can't tell because that picture is small, but the replacement curb there looks really nice. Seal coating at the stadium, and then we were due for some patchwork here at the bus garage so that it didn't have such a dip for where our drivers get off the buses. So it's much safer for them over at the bus garage. All right, so we did some roofing projects this summer. We put some Duralast on the intermediate school above where the NPR room is. We also we replaced the stairwell at the middle school, the top of the middle school. We had some leaks getting into the building and that needed to be replaced. What you don't see on here is we also replaced the roof on the softball press box. And then we have some ongoing projects that aren't finished yet, just due to all the issues with supply chain. We have metal roof replaced between the gym and the kindergarten building on that path up in the walkway, the breezeway there, and then also some metal panels over the west wing of the high school.
And so the intermediate school is now, that roof has been completely updated, all sections in the past 5 years. So that is now completely brand new.
Some painting, you can see the middle school was overdue for some painting in that gym. I'm sure Lisa would stand up and do a cheer for that. That has been done. So you can see the before and after pictures there. That bit there, the entrance to the elementary school makes a big difference when that is painted. Looks very nice. The senior lounge, we painted that. It had just some, an old logo, and they also wanted to make it seem not so just senior lounge-ish. They wanted it to be more general because we do have some study halls going on in there. And so we repainted it. It looks really, really nice, and they're happy in their new environment there. Okay, next up, the kindergarten classrooms. Oh no, this is my favorite slide. Just because we did a lot to prepare this. What was it, in July, we made the decision that we needed to use these facilities. So it doesn't look like anything from this picture, but that was our facilities office. So One side was pretty much storage with lots of shelving units with parts, and then the other side is where we had our facilities office. So we had 2 people stationed in there all day, and some workers that would come in and out throughout the day. So we had to move everything out and then move things in and also redo some flooring here. So you can see there's one classroom that has the four-bow flooring. The other classroom still has the tile, but it is in really nice shape. And we put the cubbies in, we hung some whiteboards. We also, let me get the list to go together. These are the pictures. And then that ramp, you may recall that there was actually a step going up to that, and it was deteriorating pretty badly. So we replaced it with a ramp. We have temporary railing right now. Actually, it's just a fence, but the railing in due time will be here, so we can put that on. It'll look nice. It'll be similar to the railing that is behind the commons. The railing we put up to the one, not the double door entrance, but the other side closest to the kitchen. So we did the new flooring, the cubbies. We had to extend the PA system out there. We have a phone system in both rooms now. We added several outlets to the block walls. We have a camera at the front door, the whiteboards I mentioned. We also have door alarms on all of the doors out there, so if they were to be opened, then the alarm would go off, so we would know that maybe, there's a safety situation, or a little guy, kind of just went out the door and they shouldn't have, they need to stay back in that area. We put door numbers on there. Of course, as you go around the district, you see that every window has a number on it for safety reasons, so we make sure to add those. We have signs indicated at the front, on the front door that they need to report to the office, because parents or visitors, no one is supposed to go into that building. They need to report to the front office as they would if they were entering any other door at the elementary school. Well, they can't enter any other door, but as the same signs as the other doors at the elementary school. Another safety feature that we added is we made sure that each teacher has a handheld radio, just in case they would need to get a hold of someone else across the district, really. We had to move the piping down so the little guys could flush the urinals. See the new railing and the concrete, so I already had mentioned those. So it is in full operation now, and everything's going well over here.
I have a question about
Yeah.
that. So a parent reached out to me, they were concerned about the bathroom situation. So they do have a working bathroom in there, and
Yeah.
the kids don't have to leave and go
No.
to the other building?
No, there's 2 bathrooms back there, actually.
Okay.
So there's 2 functional bathrooms back there that work, that have always worked. One of them, though, that for about a week maybe, the handle was too high up, not the urinal for them to flush, so they had to move that down further.
Okay. And are these the half-day classes, so they don't have lunch, or do they eat in there?
I think these are the half-day.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
half,
they're
and,
both-
and they go in to eat lunch.
Half-day doesn't, half-day.
Right, no, they leave from there, so yeah, they don't have,
Yeah, they have to go in here.
Okay.
they don't have to eat lunch.
Okay. Because they were concerned about safety of kids crossing the parking lot or
Oh,
going
yeah.
over to the.
Playground?
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
you're talking about the playground?
No, I'm talking about the new GES building
Yeah.
where we placed new students.
Yes.
Yeah.
A parent was concerned about little kids going in and out, and then security, which you just reassured us that there's a lock and alarm.
Yeah.
That's reassuring.
And there's
Yeah.
sidewalk that goes, all the way around, so they shouldn't have to get in the parking lot
Mhm.
at all,
Yeah.
to go to the playground, or to go to the building if they need to.
And kindergartners don't walk anywhere by themselves anyway.
No.
Okay, even in the building.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that's reassuring. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, you're welcome. Forbo, so we put Forbo in 12 classrooms this summer. And just for the record, we have 43 classrooms remaining across the district to get Forbo in those. We do have several office areas and other common spaces that, eventually have their flooring replaced. But 12 classrooms this summer, so we are getting there with 43 left. You can see the kindergarten building before and the after, and then also room 409 at the intermediate school. What you're looking at now is at the elementary school, and it's a mechanical room, and this is where we are replacing air handler unit 1 and 2, and that's an ongoing project. Should be completed by the end of December, so before the kids return to school in January. The first 2 pictures are some demo work. The concrete underneath the units was deteriorating, so that was replaced. You can see the new concrete there. So this is a pretty big job. Some things that we've done to help with the heat and cooling. And I have to say that this is, oh, I better not, is this real wood? I'm gonna knock on some wood. This is the first year I have not had anyone from the elementary school be concerned about how hot it is at the beginning of the school year. So that was a good sign, but we put some portable air conditioning units in the classrooms. Also, of course, we have fans going on in the halls and whatnot, so they're at a good temperature, they feel. The portable units also have heating elements, so in the winter when we start to experience colder temperatures, they can turn that over into heat. There's also a temporary heating unit that was placed in the courtyard. That will blow heat into the halls and keep the hallways and the restrooms at a, hopefully a nice temperature, but we'll make sure, of course, we don't get any freezing pipes. Travis sent out to the parents information about make sure your students dress in layers and that sort of thing as we approach cooler temperatures. So I think we are ready to go with that project, and we will definitely be glad when it is complete. This is our new cooling coil and condensing unit at the high school. We replaced the old McCoy unit. I have to say that we did have some complaints about the temperatures at the high school at the beginning of the school year. We're so lucky with that. But this really impacted the West Wing. We did proactively put portable air conditioning units in the the classrooms that had external windows. Of course, there were fans in the hall, whatnot, to try to keep it cool in that area. But that was kind of a battle. So they are definitely cool over there now. Glenn can tell you that it's a nice temperature, and the kids are walking around much happier than they were before. Well, really, the teachers are too, I think. Right, Dave?
Yeah, you're complaining to me.
We ordered, we'll purchase some equipment. Got Shane on our new, the new Yawnmower, tractor. And then we have the Ventrac with cab that is to be determined on when we will be getting that in. We called for an update today, but we have not heard back from them. That will be used, of course, for snow removal on sidewalks and then other projects. We can, remove that room attachment and put other attachments on there. We also ordered a 14-foot, we'll be purchasing a 14-foot trailer. So we need to replace one of our trailers that is not in good shape. In the kitchen, we have a couple of different things going on here. So at the high school, we're going to replace the exterior door. It just needs replaced. It's old, it's beat up, so we will definitely be replacing that. Of course, we'll have to paint it our blue. But then we're going to purchase some equipment to go into the kitchens. At the high school, we're replacing a reach-in cooler. We're replacing a 2-door reach-in cooler at Ace Place, which is formerly known as the NutriBar. We're also replacing a 3-door freezer at Ace Place. At the intermediate school, they are getting a dishwasher and a double oven, and that is what you see right here on the screen. The intermediate school playground. This is the design that the students, staff, and parent group came up with for the new playground at the intermediate school. The very small items there at the bottom right, those are some sensory elements for students to use. You can see there are several climbing apparatus. We still have the swings. We have the one, I would call it merry-go-round, but it spins around. So you can't see some of the equipment very well just because of how dark it shows up. But that's the design that they came up with. It was a collaborative effort over 21-22, so last school year. Mrs. Lees did send out surveys to get feedback from parents as well as, of course, students, and they also met with the students to get some ideas and the teachers. Right now, the district is paying 100% of the project up front. As soon as the PTO is able to fundraise, because they haven't been able to for the past 2 years, then it will be determined on how much they can contribute to the project. The equipment should arrive in late April, early May, and then installation will follow immediately. We spoke again to the representative from the playground company today, and it's just the lead time. Right now, it's between 9 and 11 months to get the equipment. He said, how much these normally it's like an 8 to 10 week turnaround period, and now it's just, it's unbelievable.
Unlike some of these other projects, like playgrounds are custom orders
Yeah.
too, which is what makes a difference.
Good news, though, we will be tearing down the current big toy, so the big focal point. We will be removing that, demoing that next week. The playground company has agreed to bring in these two climbing pieces of playground equipment and install temporarily at our playground. I know it's purple, it's the wrong color, but we'll certainly add some options for our students. Also, currently they have at the intermediate school 6 basketball hoops, there's 6 soccer fields, they have 2 tire obstacle course pieces, 2 tether balls, they have the exercise fitness course, 6 swings, the shelter house with picnic tables, 7 4-square boards, and 1 set of climbing swinging bars. Mrs. Lee's also worked with the staff and the students to identify some other things that they could purchase so the students can play outside. So they're going to be purchasing ring toss games, hula hoops, spike ball kit, volleyball nets, and sidewalk chalk so students can do some artwork if they would like. And that is my final slide. Does anyone have any questions?
There's a long list of summer projects, a lot of good things to get done and so forth.
Yes.
Were all those funded out of the PI budget, or was the elementary school,
Yes.
some of them were?
So I can talk through most of that. So a lot of what Tanya just presented was paid for out of the permanent improvement funds. So I'll highlight those that are not. The elementary air handler project is largely covered by ESSER funds. There was some overage that is coming out of operating. The HVAC project at the high school is also coming out of operating funds as well. The kitchen equipment is coming out of food service. So because of the food service program, the free lunch program that was offered the last 2 years, we were able to build up some funds in the food service account to be able to purchase a lot of that equipment. As Tanya mentioned, the playground, the district is covering the upfront cost of that out of permanent improvement funds, and then we'll utilize funds that the PTO is able to fundraise to offset a portion of that project as well.
Some of the flooring would have been ESSER funds as well, right? ESSER
In
dollars for?
previous years, this
Okay.
last round was
Okay.
permanent improvement.
How much does the overall PI levy generate annually roughly? And what was our summer budget for this concept?
It is about 1.5 and is what we bring in between permanent improvement and the New York Granville Community Authority funds. That makes up our total capital budget. And then we try to keep a reserve in there, carryover for emergency type situations, so we don't budget that full amount every year.
So with the air handler projects and things like that, we would have gone over that for this year.
Right, so that's why we dipped into operating funds to cover that. And we do, as part of the capital plan, we plan for these larger expenditures. So we set aside certain amounts each year, knowing that, okay, we don't have the $1 million for this HVAC project today, but we'll need it in 10 years, so we're gonna set aside a certain amount each year so that we have it 10 years down the road.
Great.
And if you remember, Thomas, a couple of years ago, when we put the income tax on, was out in 2018, we also took a portion of the inside millage and moved it to permanent improvements so that it would grow. That's the only portion of the inside millage, or only portion of property tax that does allow it to grow, or the millage is allowed to grow, is inside millage. So that was very intentional because we have aging facilities and need more and more permanent improvement monies available.
And at that time, we also allowed the levy to expire, that was on the budget because of that change.
Yes,
So,
that's correct.
where are the new facilities offices? Or just
They are in a classroom at the elementary school right now.
And was that the question?
Yeah, so did we already spend the money for the new playground?
We have an invoice that we'll pay for part of it so that they can order. And then we'll pay the rest when it's installed.
I see, so I was just wondering what the total cost was for that.
It's about $145,000 for just the playground equipment. And then there's been some conversation about a poured surface in lieu of mulch, which was
$144,000.
another $140,000 on top of that. So we're not doing that at this point, but it's being set up to where we can do that down the road. It's just a matter of like elevation and making sure they have the room to do that poured surface if we do that.
Does this include tear down and installation?
Yes.
The 145? Okay. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome.
So I just had a quick question about when the PTO makes the decision to, fund the playground, is that something that they come to you and work with you on, or is that just their own process and they independently say, this is what we'd like to fund, and eventually they make the decision on how much money to give as well?
Do I know if you want to?
I can answer that.
Okay.
So typically, the process involves the elementary principals. So Travis and Tracy work collaboratively with the PTOs to kind of establish the targeted areas of improvement. And they have that process of having once every 2 years, auctions. And they determine from that auction how much they can fund. And so like they funded the entire project at the elementary and had targeted the GIS playground next and then couldn't hold the auction. So, and then we have an annual inspection process that deems whether they can be utilized or not. Also during COVID, it was deemed that it couldn't be used. So we had to rope it off and engage differently in the process, knowing that we were going to have to cover the upfront cost because the PTO did not have the ability to fund or to have the auction. So, but typically, they use those auction proceeds to fund whatever they think that they can do at that time. So hopefully it's the total. If not, then we'll adjust.
When we put the the elementary school playground in, that was the thought, is that they would be able to cover that intermediate school playground as well, but it's escalated in price.
Yeah.
So it was much more than it was initially thought.
Is it the same company that's doing?
Yes, it is the same company.
And it's just like shipment delays, is that the, like?
Well,
sourcing?
and
Fabrication.
that
He
one,
said
yeah.
today there's like shortage of 3-inch pipe or
Yeah.
something, which
Right.
is like, I guess,
What they
highly
used
used
to,
in
yeah.
playground equipment, so, yeah.
Yeah, the logistics issues, the lead times, we're seeing that in just about every single project. Yeah, and the prices are escalating rapidly, just like when you go to buy a pound of turkey at whatever grocery store you go to, it's now $14 when it used to be $9. So we're seeing inflation across everything.
But I do appreciate hearing about the collaboration between
Yeah.
principals and parents, PTO. I mean, that's huge. That's really important.
And for anyone interested in the BTO and the process and how they can support it, tomorrow morning at 9:30 at the elementary school is the BTO meeting for the elementary grades. And open to anyone who's interested to come along and hear what's happening and offer their support. So I'll make a little plug for that.
Well done.
I'll be there myself.
Thank you, Tanya. I
Yes,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Next, we have Mr. Burnett, who's going to come up and give us a little glimpse at the parent class link and talk a little bit about the 2022 report card that was just released last week.
Good evening, everyone. The first part of this, we're just going to visually show you what Parent Class Link looks like. We talked a little bit about in August before we roll it out at the beginning of school. And so it's by no means a finished product, but you can see what it looks like at this point. Just a reminder that Parent Class Link is our new parent portal. It is not the only way to access all these programs. So I want to make that abundantly clear. A lot of families set up apps on their phone or apps on the computer that directly take them to the ones they want to, but the value of the parent portal here is it has all of these links in one place, as you'll see in 1 second. It'll also save your username and password. If you're like me, you forget that about every 3 months with your kids because maybe you don't give them a certain one so often and then you have to reset it and all that. It will remember it for you. And most of them won't make you reset that very frequently. So that is one advantage. But I also know with the prevalence of phones and how easy those are to use, and some of these have apps like Ride 360, we actually want parents to use the app for that particular application. So, you know, that's just as effective. So there's multiple ways that you can access this. I'm not going to read through that list, but that's the things that we'll look at here inside Parent Portal and what each of them do. So for this portion, I'm actually going to log in as a fake parent. You'll see the name fake parent up there. That's me. And go from there.
You're a real parent, we know.
Yes, yeah.
Right, that's not the first time it's
Record this. So anyways, when parents go to parents.classlink.com, GEBSD, this is the site that they'll see. So when you enter your email, they'll ask you for a password. And then after just a second, it will log into Parent Class Link. These are all the apps that are in here right now. There'll be other things that we add in the future just to give parents access, but for right now, we've kind of rolled it out very sequentially so that it wasn't so overwhelming setting all these things up to begin with. The very first thing available was Final Forms because we had to have those athletic forms in for this year. And we've kept Final Forms separate from the rest of this because if you've had children that have participated in 7-12 athletics, the amount of paperwork that's required from the state is actually more than the paperwork that we require in terms of coming into our schools. With all the different rules and regulations and different things that you have to fill in from doctors and so forth, it's just easier to keep it separate because of the vast amount of information. We only have so much that we can actually store in Power School. So it actually is a benefit to keep that separate. There's a link to our Facebook page, a link to our website. These are just for convenience. There's no other reason except for that. But then we get into the apps where families are going to actually get into. The one I'm not going to click on is the pay for it just because we don't want to show balances and so forth and things like that. But this is where lunch balances are taken care of. It's where fees will be paid, test fees and things like that in the future. That will all be done through pay for it. The first one we're going to look at is Power School. Again, just a reminder, Power School is our new student information system. It's a place where you can see grades, attendance, you can fill out forms. In the future, there'll be historical data like test results and so forth that we'll put in there for families to access. The nice thing is when you click on it, it's making magic happen, and it goes right into the system. So if you have your children logged in here, you save your password, all I have to do is click on it and I remembered my password from before. So I can look at grade history, attendance history, I can set up how I want to get notified via email, whether I want it daily or weekly or monthly or never. I can see what kind of comments my teachers put for my children. We use the forms piece of this pretty extensively. This is how families update their contact information. That has actually worked really seamlessly. Families put the information in, we double check it just to make sure that everything we're seeing matches up similar to what we saw before. But if families change phone numbers, email addresses, all they have to do is come fill out this form. Kelly Small and I get a notification, we go in and approve it, and it goes right into Power School, which then feeds right into our school messenger system for emergency contacts and so forth. So that's a very seamless one-time process. And if families next year don't have anything to change, they don't have to fill that form out. If they have things to change, they can change it as they see fit. So we're actually really liking this aspect of Power School. There's also places in there for schedules, school information, and just different other things, missing assignments, but the biggest thing you're gonna see on here is grades. And this example is an elementary student, so you're not gonna see grades. I did that on purpose, and I'll show you guys grades here on the screen. But you can see who the teachers are, and there's a place to click on and contact the teachers right from there if as a parent you have a question. So this is what PowerSchool looks like from the parent. Again, if the username and password is saved, it's just one click and it goes right into that particular application. The next one that we'll look at is Ride 360. And again, same thing, I click on it, I've already saved my password and username, so it goes right in. And all I have to do is click on My Students, and it will give me students that I'm connected to. It'll list what time they're going to get picked up on the bus, what time they're going to get dropped off, where that bus is going to pick them and drop them off at, and who the bus driver is, and how I can get into contact with them or the bus route should I have any concerns. The nice thing about the app portion of this, and again, I want to put a plug out there for the app. If you haven't downloaded the app as a parent, it allows us to communicate right through the app if there's something that we need to communicate via a bus. Hopefully that never happens, but sometimes there are emergency messages that we have to get out, and the app is the way that that'll be communicated. Again, I don't want to open this up because it has information about a student, but you see what it looks like if I click on My Students. I'll give you just a real quick
Can I ask a question?
glimpse. Absolutely.
Are parents able to communicate with the bus dispatcher via the app?
No, they're not.
Yes.
And that's, they are?
Yeah,
While they're driving?
No, not the bus.
No, not the bus drivers, but you
No,
can
the
communicate with the
Oh, I thought you said
dispatcher.
driver, I'm sorry. I was
That's
like,
okay.
yeah, we don't want to.
Okay, so like if my kid's not riding the bus, I can just send a message and.
Yep, there's a place right there, it either says message, like message or chat or something like that. You're not chatting with them, it ends up being a message, an email that goes directly to them.
That's nice.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Ron, I thought you said driver.
That's
I
okay.
don't think we want that happening.
No.
So, and then finally, we have Schoology. And Schoology is our learning management system. It's a place where we put instructional and curricular materials, a place where you can find assignments. It's not going to be a place where you find attendance or grades. That's going to be PowerSchool. But again, same thing, I can click in here as a parent. I've saved my access information, and up here is my name, and if I click down on it, I'll see my students listed underneath, and as I get more students that may be coming to school or leave school, I can add them too, or take them out just with a simple code that we'll provide as a school district. So in the future, when we send out this information, like for example, next year to parents, this year we sent it out in like 3 different waves of information. It'll be one email saying, this is your access for ClassLink, just in case you forgot it or you're a new family. This is your access for PowerSchool, just in case you forgot it or you're a new family. And this is your access for Schoology, in case you're a new family or you forgot it. And hopefully all that will be saved, and that will work much more efficiently than trying to add all this like we did at the beginning of the school year.
One of the benefits of making a student information system conversion is you are able to clean a lot of data. So a lot of the work that Mr. Bernath and Kelly Small have been doing is cleaning up what was in our previous student information system as it was converted over. So it's kind of like cleaning house. You're able to clean up some of the things that maybe have been causing issues in the past, and really make sure that your data is clean, which will be very beneficial moving forward.
20 years of Dazzle baggage is what I would call it. So this is what Parent ClassLink looks like and the apps within. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. We'll go on to the report card.
Well, mostly just thank you for all the work for you and your team have put into this. It is an enormous undertaking. And I believe from what I've heard from the parents and the community perspective, it's gone really well. But that's not because it's been easy, right? It's because you guys have done a whole lot of work behind the scenes in making that happen. What do you envision for kind of support going forward? And are there things we can do to make sure that it continues to be as seamless, or do you have the resources with organizations to be able to work behind the scenes and keep it moving?
Yeah, I think we're getting there with PowerSchool. That's been, it's a tougher place to get support locally because we're one of the few districts that use it locally. So we've had to branch out a little bit from our work locally and get some support in other places, but that's coming along. You know, the other, you know, the Ride 360, I think, has probably been the smoothest out of all of these. That's been seamless, at least from my perspective. I think Tanya would agree with that. Schoology we've used for several years, so it's just really a matter of getting parents the new access to it. Other than that, it's kind of been in place. But you're also dealing with companies that have to make things talk to each other, and we're relying on them sometimes, and that's been a challenge at times as well. But we got through it, and you know, I think once it's in place, the thing is you just want to make sure that new families get access immediately once they get enrolled. That's probably, with all the different apps, making sure that we can get all that information in one place for them and make that efficient for them as well is probably the next challenge that we're going to have.
And I haven't heard any feedback from staff, but I'm sure there's been a lot of adaptation for the various components that are important and things like that. And I hope that the training went well there and it's generally accepted.
The training was interesting, but I think it served its purpose. So everybody seems to know how to use it. We have a few hiccups. I mean, this has not been perfect in terms of, you know, we like, just as an example, we've got grades in the middle school. If they're put in first quarter, they're showing up in second quarter too for some reason. And right now we don't know why. So there's little hiccups like that, but in general, I think it's been as smooth a transition as you can with moving assist, to be honest with you.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Thanks for your hard work there. Okay, great.
If there's no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and go to the state report card. So we come out of a pandemic and we have a new state report card ranking system to explain to everyone. So timing, they've been saying this for years, so the defense of the legislator, no idea, throw them too much under the bus. And I actually like this a little bit better. Instead of the A, B, C, D, F, which, you know, kind of has some negative connotations, or at least some negative perceptions from communities and staff members and students and just, you know, the state in general. It's now a 5-star system. So the lowest ranking is a 1-star in any given area, and the highest ranking in any given area is a 5-star. There is no composite ranking this year. We're a year away from that. So there won't be a designation that collectively we are this. That'll happen starting next year. The other thing that you won't see this year is this college and career workforce and military readiness, because they're still determining how they're going to actually measure that particular component. So I don't have much information on that. In fact, I have very little information on that because we don't know how it's going to be measured yet. That I would expect that to be coming here in the next, I would say 3 to 6 months at the most, because they want to put it on the report card in 2025. So that would give schools 2 years to prepare for what that particular component's going to measure. So we're going to focus on these 5 right here. Just to kind of give you a general overview, we were 5 stars in every area except progress, in which we were a 4-star. And I'm going to go through each one of these and kind of explain what that means. But it's obviously a significant start to this new system. It's results that we would expect historically. And I think what you're going to hear from me is it's kind of a return to where we've been as a district, and even exceeding it in some situations. So that's really good news coming out of the last couple of years, and I think that's a testament to we stayed in school, and a lot of families the option to come to school if they wanted to, or stay at home and still provide a rigorous education for them when that didn't maybe happen everywhere. And so that's a testament to our staff and the students and families working together during probably the most difficult time any of us have ever experienced in education, to come out on basically where we left off. And that's really good news. So the first 5-star component is achievement. So the way this is ranked now is they'll take the performance index scores, and that's how well your students score on state tests, how many of them score advanced, how many score accelerated, proficient, etc. on state tests, and they put it into this lovely formula where if a student's proficient, you get 1 point for that test for that student. If they're advanced, you get 1.2 points. If they score limited, you get 0.3 points. So you kind of see how that changes with different tests. And if they don't test, you get 0 points. That actually is could be a significant ding, for lack of a better word, on a lot of districts. We had 0.1% of our students that weren't tested, and in every situation where they didn't test, I actually completely 100% agree that those students should have tested for a variety of reasons. So, but there are some districts that have 2 and 3% that really can change your PI score pretty drastically. So they take that score right there and they say, okay, what's the top 2% of the districts in the state, and what's their average and they take your performance index and divide it by that average. So the top 2% of districts in the state, the average was 107.3. You take our 105.6 and divide it by that 107.3, and we're at 98.4%. That puts us 13th in the state in terms of performance index. So we're right at that 2% threshold that's coming up with this number of 107.3. That's number one in Central Ohio by over a couple of points from a performance index perspective. And it's where we would have been very close to pre-pandemic. So different tests in different years. I don't know if we can compare apples to apples in that situation, but they are similar tests, and our kids did similarly well given that particular test. The other thing is all the indicators that we have. We still have all these, but they're not actually measured on those. We met every indicator except one, and I'm going to go back to 7th grade math. That's the one indicator we don't meet. We skipped 2/3 of our students past 7th grade math. I do want to point out though that 7th grade math passing percentage was 10% higher than it was last year. Which is, that's great news. It's a different cohort of students, but still you want to see that kind of growth. A couple other things that I want to point out, if you look at, from a positive perspective, our geometry scores are almost 10% higher than they were last year. And I know Lauren and Tyler at the high school did a lot of work around diving into data that they got during the pandemic. And I think it's paid off for students in terms of their performance. And the reason I point out the high school too is with these passing percentages all in the upper 80s, lower 90s, these students now don't have to worry about graduation requirements. They're going to meet the Algebra 1 and ELA 2 requirement. They're going to get seals, at least one state seal that's required. That just opens up their schedule, their junior and senior, to take what they want instead of maybe these courses that they have to because they have to get a diploma. So that's a nice thing, to just get out of the way for students and less anxiety about it, and they're on their path towards graduation. A couple other places I want to point out, 4th and 5th grade, those are grade levels that we're concerned about impact from the pandemic. If anything the pandemic taught us is older kids seem to be less impacted than younger kids. And I don't think that's rocket science to come up with that, but there's data to support that as well. Our 4th grade and 5th grade scores both went up compared to last year. So that was really good to see. In fact, 5th grade math is 9th in the state in terms of its passing percentage. And I'm going to show you something on the next slide that's going to befuddle you based on that statement, but I want to point that out right now. And then the last thing is in 3rd grade, we actually had 83% of our students pass the ELA. During the pandemic, that was in the high 70s. So, and a marked improvement there. Again, with a group, with a population and a subject area, those kids missed out on 3 months of 1st grade if you backtrack and go back to 2020. So, lots of positives here from an achievement perspective.
And the performance index number is a number that's a little bit like the number in the past, but it really can't be compared because it's different testing, is that right? Like I remember PI numbers, and some people have that number in mind. It's not necessarily direct apple to apple.
It's different tests, but the same tests. They're supposed to be relatively similar tests. I think the best
Are they
thing...
leveled or something like that to make that
they
number
are.
consistent?
And Thomas, I think the best way to compare it is you compare yourself with how other schools perform.
Exactly, right.
And
That's
so,
where my head is on that.
10 years ago, we were in the 30s in the state in PI, and we've been consistently in the top 15 for in the last 6 or 7 years, if not further back.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a better gauge of how you're comparing against everybody else that's taking those, and not just what your actual score is. Your score may drop, and you could actually go up because everybody else drops even more. So.
Yeah, thank you.
When you say 1st and Central Ohio, does that include Columbus schools, Olenchanging, and all of those schools?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's what the dispatch would consider Central Ohio.
Wow, so that's great. I feel like we should applaud. That's great. Good job, students and teachers.
It is something to be proud of, absolutely. The next slide is progress. So with a 4-star rating in progress, that means we achieved better than average progress or above expected progress. There's moderate evidence. The state would say there's moderate evidence to say that our students grew more than expected. So if you kind of put that in context, very high achievement, above expected growth, that's a good place to be from an educational institution perspective. The colors on here just signify how much growth. So the blue and the, looks like black, but I think it's actually navy blue, are above expected growth. The green areas are expected growth. The red areas and orange areas are orange areas. The red areas would be below expected growth. And if it's gray, we didn't have a test in that particular area, or we don't offer that subject. We don't have math 1 and 2, for example, right here. So obviously, the first human nature is, okay, why are these two red? I'm going to go back to that 5th grade math. 95+% of the students passed the state assessment. 94% of them passed in 4th grade, so they actually went up 1%, yet they're red in growth. I have no explanation for that because we haven't got the data yet to drill down to why that is. But that is a significant question that I have, is how can you get the same number of students passing and still have a plentiful amount of advanced and accelerated students and then say that they didn't meet their growth target, or even be well below it? It just doesn't make any sense.
I think, sorry, if I read this at home, and if I read it correctly, I think it just means that they didn't improve significantly from the previous year, but that's because they were highly ranked the previous year as
Right.
well.
But they still performed at a very similar level. It should be green, at least in my opinion.
But it says students made less progress than expected.
Yeah, significant evidence.
He thinks it should be made progress similar
Similar. I would say it should be similar, if nothing else.
Similar to
to the statewide expectation.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, the problem with data is, especially a report card like this, until we get all the teacher level reports and so forth, that it gives more questions than answers. But that's certainly a question I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into. And biology is really not different. We had 92% of our students pass biology, and that was very similar to the previous year. So why was their expectation so much higher maybe than where they actually ended up? I don't know the answer to that. We're going to have to dive more into that. I'd rather focus on the fact that if you look at all grades for all subjects, we're either at or above expectation. If you, in totality, we're above progress, and I think that's a good place to start from an achievement perspective and a growth perspective.
So are you going to look at data from the state or on data from
From ours,
Okay.
our local data.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, absolutely. And teachers will get value-added data here towards the end of October that they'll be able to drill down, and that's part of their growth plans and their analysis, and you do a really good job with that. We've been doing it for years, and like I said, it's not about, we're not going to say, oh my gosh, red, we got to, what's the data say? What's it tell us? Is there something that we're missing?
Right, is it something
Yeah.
that's what it sounds like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gap closing is very closely related to the progress measures because it looks at all the subgroups that we have. So think of all the different ethnicity groups that we have in our district. If you have 15 of a group, you actually get rated in that particular area. Our special ed population, our ELL population, our economically disadvantaged population, just to name a few, are all different areas that we looked at. And what they do in this gap closing is they put a percentage of those together and say how many of your goals from a progress and achievement perspective did you meet. And then also included that, this is kind of a catch-all for gap closing, they throw chronic absenteeism in there, and they also threw gifted value added in there. So it's kind of a smorgasbord for all the subgroups in our district and how they perform from an achievement perspective and a growth perspective. You have to get a score of 60% to be a 5-star. We got a score of almost 90%. We met every achievement group. There are a couple of groups that they have positive growth, but they didn't have extremely positive growth, so you don't get those points, and that's why we're less than 100. But that's going to be a really strong score from a gap closing perspective. But it's all based around achievement for these subgroups and also value added or progress for those subgroups that we talked about in the previous slide. And then they throw the gifted and chronic absenteeism here as kind of a add-on, so to speak. So we had 48 possible points on this, and I believe we got 44, if I remember correctly.
How's chronic absenteeism measured in the
So it's actually a state measurement. If a student misses, Lisa, you got to help me out on this, is more than 30 hours, is that correct? Chronic absenteeism, 36? 36, thank you. If they miss more than 36 hours of school, then they're considered chronically absent.
For the year.
For the year. So now, the interesting thing about that, the benchmark for the state was 22%, so 9.6 we were okay. I think we all know why it was 9.6. That's not typical for us. So, but quarantines and more quarantines were the leading cause of that. Early literacy is the K-3 literacy of the past. We were a 5-star here. We don't get a rating for improving K-3 literacy because less than 10% of our kindergarten students are not on track. Then you can start actually identifying specific kids, and the state never wants to do that. So it's really a combination of what was our proficiency in 3rd grade and how many students went on to 4th grade. And if you combine these two numbers, I believe it's 60% of this number and 40% of this number. We ended up with a score of 89%, and you have to have 88 to get a 5-star. So that's close, but it's still a 5-star.
It's 89.7.
Yes.
Little more.
Yeah, a little more.
How do we compare in terms of our 3rd grade proficiency rating? Like,
To,
I guess the state, but I'm also thinking just Central Ohio.
well, the state we're well above.
Okay.
I think the easiest way maybe is to our similar school districts.
Yeah.
And so this is what I would paint this picture for you. And I think it's a question that I've talked to Jeff many times about is, you know, when you look at our 3rd grade scores versus our similar districts, we're actually just a notch below the similar district average. And in 4th grade, it goes up a little more, and up a little more. And by the time students get into 6th and 7th and 8th grade, we're several percentage points above the similar district average. By the time we get to high school, in some cases, we're 5 to 10% above the similar district average. So, you know, our kids' trajectory goes like this. And what we see a lot of is sometimes schools have better scores in 3rd grade than us, but then by the time they're in 5th grade, their scores are much lower than ours. So,
Their ELA scores are.
yes, the ELA in particular. Math is pretty, you know, we're competitive or better across the board in mathematics. So, you know, does that go back to instituting a love of reading and not pushing a test down 6, 7, and 8-year-old students on their plates every single day? I think there's something to be said for that, but it's really hard to measure. But what I can tell you is over time, we significantly outperform the average of our similar districts. And you can imagine what our similar district list looks like. And I don't have it memorized.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. Yes, okay, thank you.
And then finally, graduation. So this is always the number that, you know, we had 2% of our students not graduate. Almost 100% of the time. Those are students who are special education that stay for a 5th year. We let them walk at graduation, they get a diploma, they're done with their classes, but they're doing like Project Search or something like that each year, because look at our 5-year graduation rate. When we actually can say they graduated, we're back to 100%. We're not going to take that opportunity away from those students. It's a valuable experience for them, and this is really indicative of where we've always been in the past. That we're going to be 98, 99 for the 4-year graduation rate, and then 5-year, you know, we would want to be 100 for that reason. So, high achievement, high growth, students graduate, we fill in gaps between there. There's the Cliff Notes version of our safety report card.
And we're the best in the Central Ohio region.
So, the other thing that I would add to that is, this is just local report card building. This board has been very intentional about creating an atmosphere for the whole child. So, you know, it doesn't report on our arts programs, our athletic programs, all of the extracurricular and elective opportunities that we provide for our students, and the perspective of the portrait of a graduate. So it really is 50% of the equation in our thought process. We always use it to drive continuous improvement, but we also look at a lot of other metrics to determine what we view as success for our students. And, you know, when we talk about what we want our Blue Aces to be when they walk across the stage, we don't necessarily reference their 5 stars. We reference the portrait of a graduate competencies of being collaborative, adaptable, resilient, responsible, empathetic, critical thinkers. And so that's of equal value, if not more value, to the students and parents as far as their future success. So just wanted to throw in that nugget, even though Ryan does an amazing job of articulating exactly what we do in the classroom from an academic standpoint. I know as a board you care more broadly about the entire child. So just wanted to throw that in there as well. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Cool.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Ryan, for both presentations. And Brittany, let's talk about the monthly financial.
All right. So first, looking at our cash balance, and really we want to talk, or what I want to highlight, is that we have two kind of cash cycles. We have this monthly trend where we build up cash, spend down, build up, spend down. And that's largely caused because we receive a majority of our revenue 2 times a year. So it doesn't, our revenue doesn't come in evenly as our expenditures pay out. So that's what causes that cyclical balance throughout the year, month to month. And August happens to be the high point in that cash balance cycle, and then we'll spend down from there, hit December, January, and then build back up from there. So comparing August this year to last year, we're about 4.6 million above where we were, and that's due to the annual cash balance cycle that I'll show on the next slide. So annually, we get into the levy cycle, and the same thing happens annually as it does monthly. Our revenue doesn't come in exactly equal to our expenditures in any given year. Typically, you see an increasing cash balance after a levy is passed, and then kind of spend down from there. So you can see the green line here represents the cash balance over the next 4 years, including the income tax renewal. The red line is a cash balance that drastically drops off if the levy renewal does not go through. So we're in fiscal year 23 right here, and our revenue represented by the dark bars here is expected to exceed our expenditures, so we're going to continue to grow that cash balance over the next couple of years. Then looking at revenue for the month of August compared to last August, really we just have a timing issue here on a couple of items. Property tax advances, how those come in compared to the settlement, just falls in one month or another. And then timing of fee payments. So with the implementation of Power School, we wanted to wait until class schedules are finalized before we roll out fee payments from parents so that we're not having to issue refunds and all of that. So we'll start to see that even out over the coming months. Looking at revenue year to date for local tax revenue, we are up in that line item, and that's 3 components. So that's 6.5% increase in the income tax. So we saw an increase in the income tax revenue in July of this year compared to last year. We also had a small increase in property tax. As Jeff mentioned, that largely does not increase over time. So that is due to increases in delinquencies, the small increase that we get on inside millage, and there could be some timing variance in there as well. And then 9.1% increase in public utility personal property. That does grow over time, but it does represent a small portion of our total revenue pie.
Brittany, I would also mention that, today we met with our Lincoln County auditor and talked a little bit about that notion of property tax increases and valuations. And he's going to actually put together some information that I think is important to socialize with the community. Most people continue to forget that, as property values increase, the millage gets rolled back to collect the same amount. So we don't get additional revenue. And it's a concept that doesn't make any intuitive sense. But I think Mike Smith, who actually is a Granville resident, is going to put together a one-pager that I think will be helpful to help articulate that. Brittany shared a couple of examples with them, and they were very receptive. So I think that relationship is also advantageous in communicating that, because it doesn't really make sense.
And especially, all the little nuances of state revenue as well, including the fact that, we're not on a floor, a 20-mil floor, for example, where many school districts around us are.
Yeah.
Right? So I think in other Lincoln County school districts, this same thing doesn't happen. So that people might hear, like, oh, property values are going to be repriced higher, my taxes are going to go up. That's true if you're not in Granville School District.
Right, but in our school districts, we're not on the floor, and so the revenue is consistent and does not adjust with inflation even though house prices go up.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, so people hear like, oh my gosh, no, I mean, I'm sure Mike Smith's getting different feedback from different communities in Hudson County relative to that.
So then looking at the expenditure side, salary and benefits are up with normal step and base increases, and then we also had an increase in severance payments that were paid out. So that's when an employee retires, they get paid out a portion of their sick days, so that falls under that category. And then all other expenses, obviously we're dealing with inflation on this as well, so we'll continue to see increases in our other categories, but we also have an increase there for software materials. And this is just for the month of August. When I flip to the year to date, the all other expenses includes the software materials and the HVAC payment that we had last month. So that will continue to grow as well, especially because I mentioned the elementary project is split between ESSER funds and operating. So the operating portion will show up here, but obviously I'm using the federal dollars to pay the earlier invoices so that we can keep our funds as long as possible and stretch those dollars, and using federal funds first on that project. So we'll see that later in the year. So speaking of COVID, again, as a reminder, this is how we've spent all of the sources of COVID dollars, even those that have been completely spent. So today we heard a lot and saw great pictures from Tanya about the facility improvements. And in total, it's almost $3 million in COVID dollars for all of these different expenditure categories. So those that we have left to spend are just these three sources. We have under 10% of the ESSER 2 and 3 left to spend. ARP and ESSER, the General Assembly allocation, we have about 2/3 left on both of those. Again, this is largely the elementary HVAC project, and then we have an intervention position at the elementary that will also come out of that allocation. This is the same information from the previous graph, just listed here in a little bit more detail. And then I also have on here the dates, just as a reminder of how long we have to spend these funds, but we should be done spending them well before those cutoff dates. But all of those funds, all of the 2.9 million funds have either been spent or budgeted and will be spent before those dates. Last slide here is just our cash reconciliation. And we have our red tree investment that is, this is an old slide, so that is not the correct one, but I have it in the printed copy is the correct one. Because this should be at 8 million, the red tree investment is at 8 million now, so I apologize for that. But that is on the plus side now, so that is good news as well. So at least one positive based on interest rates is earning more.
Yeah, I would also highlight the fact that with the ESSER dollars that we did receive, there were a lot of reporting requirements. Brittany spent a lot of time.
And audits.
And audits.
Reporting, audits.
Going through the expenditure process and making sure that everything, all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, and she's done a fantastic job of going through that process, which has not been easy. But for the $3 million that we received, we're happy to do it. I'm happy for Brittany to do it.
Thank you.
Could you run back up to that long-term cash balance cycle, one kind of levied on and so forth? I think you did a nice job of explaining the short-term wave and the long-term wave and so forth. I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but again, because 80% of our local revenue doesn't increase with inflation, we're in the levy cycle. From the looks of this, it's kind of flattening out 25, 26. So would you expect that in a 4 to 5 years after that would be the time where the cash balance would be to the point where we would want incremental property tax to offset inflation over the next 4 or 5 years? Like, that's big crystal ball and I'm putting on the spot, but
Yeah,
we should be
so
thinking?
the income tax is obviously great because it grows with inflation, so it's helping us stretch that levy cycle. So what we're trying to accomplish with that is put as much time between the need for a new property tax as possible. But that's not, the property tax cycle isn't gonna go away. So yes, at some point, we will need a new property tax. Anytime you're looking at a forecast and the revenue bar gets close to the expenditure bar and your cash balance begins to decline, that is when you start looking at needing a new revenue source. So yes, based on this information here, it would be likely that we would want to start talking about new revenue source in '26. But hopefully we can stretch that out as long as possible because again, this is a forecast, it's not a budget. So we always make changes as we get out into these future years. We're very conservative on the expenditure side. You know, we include assumptions that we really have no clue about, especially on insurance, medical insurance costs and what that's gonna look like. So things like that can change drastically, which can improve the numbers here or make them worse depending on, you know, which scenario holds true. So the forecast is all about the assumptions that you put into it, and then the budget is how you actually plan and stretch that dollar as long as possible.
I think the other point is that green line really does reflect the economic conditions of the community.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if people are doing well from an income tax perspective, that green line will continue to grow with that ultimate, you know, tipping point. That's part of the natural levy cycle. But if there was an economic downturn, that green line would reflect that as well. And so from a planning perspective, that gives us the ability to adjust and say, okay, you know, the economic reality for our community now is maybe a downward turn. We need to adjust our spend, adjust our planning differently. So where a property tax is just a flat amount over time.
And, you know, I think that's shown in this chart also, but the fact that, I mean, the dark bars, the total revenue are relatively flat, right? You know, because they, for the most part, don't increase with inflation because property tax doesn't. The small portion of our income that is income tax will increase a little bit, but the lighter bars, right, are our expenses, which increase with inflation, like anything else, especially these days of high inflation. We should expect those to continue to go up. Right, so I think there's a lot that's kind of in this, but it's a really helpful tool, so I appreciate you showing that to us, even this is just a monthly review. That's good to keep that long-term picture in mind.
I just wanted to clarify, so what Tom was asking, in a few years, and you said by like 2026, you would need to reassess the property tax levy. That's only assuming we don't pass this renewal?
No, that's assuming we do.
Okay.
So.
Not by 2026, though.
So
Yeah.
these two bars combined equal, so that's this color here, the light gray, dark gray, represents the income tax renewal.
Okay.
So the income tax renewal plus the rest of our revenue is almost exactly equal to our expenditures in '26. So when those two are equal, that's when you start, when your cash balance starts declining because you're spending more than you're bringing in. And that's your typical sign in a forecast that you'll need more revenue.
Okay.
If the income tax levy is not renewed, we will need more revenue, an alternative revenue source in '25 because we won't have this dark gray section at the top and we're already drastically spending more than what we're bringing in. And this red line here really shows how the cash balance starts declining.
And then you get hit with a yearly cycle, because that's also a year-end cash balance number, which doesn't reflect our low point in the year, which is from the previous slide.
Correct.
Right,
This
so you
is-
can't think, oh, I still got a bunch there, right?
Yeah,
That
so
actually
the-
might be a negative number in bad months of the year.
Exactly, so this line represents June 30th. So you have to remember, June, we're up here. In December and January, we're lower than that. So
That's-
you have to
and
think
again,
about
that's
the
more
monthly
than a
cycles.
$5 million swing, which is more than the previous chart, right? So we're actually in big trouble sooner if without the income tax, which is 20% of our revenue.
Thank you.
Is that all?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you. Okay, this brings us to the time in the agenda where we welcome public comments. Anyone that wishes to stand up and speak for 3 to 5 minutes is welcome to address the board. Please state your name and address, and we'd love to hear from you. Seeing none, we also welcome public comment by email or online. All the board members, I'm sure, are open to the community, so please reach out if there's anything that comes to mind. Okay. Brings us to board discussion. We identified 3 areas that we'll touch upon and just see if there's any feedback from the board. From a strategic planning perspective, we have been socializing the cooperative strategies report. I know that last week Herb Kohler and I met with a group from Denison. They did an article in the paper just recently, so people are starting to ask more and more questions about the cooperative strategies presentation, but we've given that presentation at the chamber, not at the chamber, at Rotary and Kiwanis. We will give it at the chamber and Otterbein in the future. So we're just trying to socialize a little bit of that information, just to make sure it's front and center on people's minds as they're starting to make sense of how that might impact the schools. There are a couple initiatives that I just want to make sure that we continue to talk about. So the regional planning effort by the Evans Foundation is continuing. They've hired a consultant named Planning Next to look at taking a regional approach to thinking about growth that includes a lot of things like transportation routes and housing and economic development. It's pretty holistic. They've been working with a lot of the municipalities and jurisdictions. They've interviewed schools. I was interviewed as a representative of Granville Schools. So that effort is continuing, and I know that they're meeting quite regularly as municipalities with the Planning Next consultants to continue to advance that forward as they continue to plan. Brittany is she's on the board of trustees for the chamber. I know that the chamber is anticipating that their consultant, Neighborhood Strategies, Jim Leonard, is going to have some type of product in the near future to share with the Chamber of Commerce related to economic development. So I anticipate that coming online shortly.
Yeah, we're meeting with the Economic Development Committee of the Chamber on Wednesday to put some finishing touches on his report, and then he's presenting that to the larger chamber at the luncheon on October 19th.
The comprehensive plan document is also under revision, so Herb Kohler is managing that process with Union Township, the Chamber, GRD, myself, and several other groups. They're trying to put the finishing touches on that by spring so that they can have an up-to-date comprehensive plan that kind of aligns with and maybe articulates to the regional planning conversation by the Evans Foundation. The Union Township representatives are also engaging with a consultant, the Montrose Group, to look at what development might look like in Union Township. Brittany Thomas and I also participated in that feedback session with Lakewood City Schools representatives. So I know that they've been working with business leaders, school leaders, and maybe some municipality partners in that process as well. So I guess my point in sharing all that information is a lot of things are happening on a daily basis. And so we're making sure that we're at the table as much as possible, and we will continue to put ourselves in a position to try and be in the know and at the table for those conversations. You can just reference a couple of articles last week that talked about other municipalities and TIFs and how school districts are talking to their municipalities about the impact of TIFs, which are tax incremental financing agreements that might not be advantageous to the schools. What we need to do is continue to work with our partners to make sure that we're at the table and we can advance the needs of the school district at the same time as infrastructure and all the other needs that are going to be occurring in the near future. As well as us continuing our process with the strategic planning group, which will be meeting in the next month or so to, get a little bit more detailed and strategic about taking the cooperative strategies report and making it more operational for us as an organization, so that they can bring recommendations to you as a board. Recommendations might include, looking at land availability, looking at, water sewer availability, looking for the next 20 to 30 to 50 years of this organization and setting us up for success. And that's really, their goal. So, we're probably going to focus more on the short term, 10 years, but really we should be thinking long term in aggregate.
So is the next strategic planning task force meeting, is that scheduled?
It's not scheduled yet, but it's going to go out this week. There's some things, we're traveling, as an organization to a couple of events, so we need to, get back online.
There's just so much happening, and that's such a good group with a lot of capacity to be able to help us out and think through some of these things. Last time that group met, they helped come up with some good assumptions that I think we need to kind of circle back on at some point, and like really put some firm numbers in a forecast kind of thing, and so we can get some idea.
And, obviously Brittany highlighted the levy discussion components and the fiscal impact of our 2018 approach for the all-income tax and how that filtered into increasing our revenue stream for permanent improvement, but also a long-term strategy, especially in a high-growth environment, and that ballot or that issue will be on the ballot November 8th. Right? Yes. And then obviously any components of the board reports that you want to discuss at this time, we can talk about that. That was just me setting the stage.
Great. Let's start with double Louise. Did anybody have a report from our support organizations? Has anybody been to meetings of any sort that might?
So yeah, I just wanted to report on the Granville Education Foundation, and that is an extremely hardworking board. So they have fully funded 5 grants for teachers this year, and the information around those will come out soon, but it's projects that teachers write grants for, and they're exciting, they're very exciting. And then they have plans for their annual fundraising campaign, so just be on the lookout, because there's been, I love seeing them pop up in Facebook. I don't love Facebook, but I love when the Education Foundation pops up, because they highlight those exciting projects that the teachers do, and the scholarships that they fund, and of course, the Jody Van Tine Awards that they give out, so.
Great, thanks.
Tomorrow we're having the K through something, the book studies. I'm going to go to that with Mr. Morris and parents in the community. So we'll be reading a book. It's a book study. It's open to the public. I think it's not too late if anybody's still interested in joining the book club. Tomorrow we will meet at 6:30, I believe, at the cafeteria in GES, and then we will have a few weeks to read the book and then get together as a group and discuss it.
What's the book that's being read?
How to raise an adult.
How to raise an adult.
How to raise an
I didn't want to
Yeah.
say it wrong. Yes. How to raise an
I know
adult.
kindergarten parents and first grade parents don't think about adulthood.
Yes, we do.
But it's a really good book. Parenting is challenging in an age of, social media and technology advances. So it's a great opportunity for us to talk as a community about, some of the things that we've learned.
And again, I mentioned briefly before, tomorrow morning at 9:30 is the PTO meeting for kindergarten through 6. They rotate between morning meetings and afternoon meetings to make sure that everybody has a chance to attend and so forth.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Afternoon meetings?
Yeah, so I think every other month they're something like 4 or 5 in the afternoon or something like that.
Oh, I see,
So,
but tomorrow's
yeah,
the
tomorrow's
morning.
the morning meeting, yeah.
Do you think I can bring one of my kids?
Kids show up all the time.
Yeah.
Yes. We're kid friendly.
Last week, I attended CTEC's open house, and I thought it was really exciting. There were a lot of potential students that were there with their parents, looking at the different curriculum and opportunities there, and there were a lot of vendors talking to current students as well as prospective students about the opportunities that are going to be presented by Intel coming in. So they did, it was a really nice job, and it was very well attended. I also went to the Athletic Boosters meeting in August. They had a very successful Day at the Races fundraiser at Cherry Valley Hotel. And they're just working together with Josh Duvall, our athletic director, on putting together a budgeting process for all the coaches, so that there's a real organized identification of what is needed every year. So they meet monthly. I think it's the second Wednesday at 4 p.m. in the health room at the high school, and it's open to the public. That's all I have.
They've been all the supportive organizations have been stepping up for our concessions as well. We've had really well-attended Friday night football games, which has been wonderful to watch our team doing great this year. Great to see so many community members out there enjoying the game as well as working hard at concessions and more. Yeah.
And the marching band.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I'll make a quick plug here, since we're talking about this coming Friday night, is homecoming, right? And so we expect a great crowd again, and it's going to be a really fantastic event. And starting with some pregame activities as well.
Yeah, we have the homecoming announcement pregame. We also are going to be welcoming members of the Hodge family, that Walter J. Hodges, where his namesake, the stadium namesake, we have members of his family and Luella Reese, who did the challenge gift to us for the stadium. So we might have 20 or 30 members of their family, and we're going to be welcoming them to the Center G pregame. And then I plan on taking the field again to join our marching band. So, one more time.
So 2 out of the 3 things.
And I just my anxiety just went through the roof and realized I need to go back and practice. Yeah.
I plan to come.
All right. Should be a great night.
And it's also gonna be a good game.
Yes.
I hear they're playing at school district right now.
Yes. It should be a very good game. Two great teams.
Relative to growth, with the groundbreaking just recently and things like that, which is even more so in the news and nationally. And I've been hearing from people across the country that now our name is popping up, and they're like, "Isn't that close to you?" And we're like, "Yeah, it's been very busy." And I've been reaching out to as many folks as I can, community members and other elected officials of all different sorts. And I think, like Jeff said, the key is really coming together on this, and so I'm just so thankful to the Evans Foundation for engaging to planning next group, because I think if we act as individuals in this and just look at our own little community or whatever, it's going to be a real problem. And I think there are places around here that are clearly feeling a lot of stress from the development that don't really have the capacity or didn't have the long-range planning in place. It just really makes me so thankful that Granville has got a lot of folks that have been thinking about this for a long time. We have a comprehensive plan in place. The village and the township collaborate and work really well together. And so, I have a great confidence that we're going to come out of this fantastic, especially the Granville School District, which has had great education for 200 years, right? This is not going to change that. It's going to change the look of our community in just just from a numbers perspective. It's going to change some of the communities around us even more. But the more I, engage with these surrounding communities and within our own, I know that it's going to be an exciting ride, but we'll come out well from it. Have there been other things that other board members have heard relative to the growth or concerns that are out there specifically that we need to make sure we address? People have talked about, schools, and I think we've offered a couple of good messages recently, like we always know that with increasing enrollment, at some point we've needed schools, right? And we've had a solid incremental plan in place, to build more capacity in our schools when it's come. And it's great that the strategic task force is going to help us extend that beyond just incremental, but to have a bigger vision for what it means longer term and what kind of facilities are going to best support us. So I think we're doing exactly the right things, and we've been really ahead of the game there, even with all that's happened before the Intel announcement as well in our communities. So
Absolutely. Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
mm-hmm.
It's, I use the analogy of, it's hard to land a C-130 in a very short runway. So, if you're trying to land a big plane, you have to have a lot of runway. And when you're trying to build a school, you have to have runway. And you have to have time in order for that process to work itself out. And so, one of the tasks of the task force is going to be, what's that horizon look like? Is that 5 years out, 6 years out, 7 years out? Let's build capacity now, and let's set ourselves up for success so that we can do our primary job, which is educate.
Right.
Not just academics, but athletics and arts and all the other things that we add to the student's perspective. So,
yep. And a super important key piece of that is sustainable finances. Right, and I think the fact that, 5 years ago, we looked at putting in this income tax, right, was really a fantastic move. I think that was just the right thing to be an important piece. And as we forecast out the kind of folks that are going to be moving here and the kind of finances that we're going to have, we can't fully predict exactly how many houses or what kind of incomes, but we know that the income tax was a great move, right? And I think we're kind of ahead of our times a little bit doing that. I'm looking forward to November 8th. The feedback I've heard from community is that there's still some questions, right? Because people haven't quite wrapped their mind around it. They haven't really thought about the ballot. It's still a little bit before November 8th. But when they hear the story, when they understand kind of the position that we're in and where we're headed, they've been positive and supportive. So I'm looking forward to continuing to find ways to reach out to any community member that has questions, right? And I'm sure we'll be doing more publishing through a group to kind of help socialize the idea a little bit more and make sure folks understand what's coming on November 8th, because it's, I think, going to be a critical part of, sustainable financing, which is going to be, a core of what's going to support the district moving forward. So, does anybody else have any conversation or questions?
I just think it's important to continue to go back to why we made the decision in 2018, because there are a lot of members of our community now that weren't here then. Yeah. And so, going back and telling the why, a growing revenue stream is important. I think is and why we're being in a strong cash position going into a high growth environment is advantageous. So just, sharing those facts is important.
And anybody that's moved to the district recently or moved to Ohio recently or just has kids in school recently, the whole concept of a levy cycle, right, is something that we need to continue to educate on. So I'm hopeful the community is going to step up and give some tools there to be able to help communicate that, and I'm confident moving forward. So. Any other ideas of discussion or things that have come up from what you heard from your kids or through the schools?
Well, one of my children's gonna be very happy to hear about that playground and what, the design of it.
Yes,
He knows
yes.
it's a little while off, but he was, yep. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
Great. So that takes us into our action agenda. We only have one action item. 10.01 is the approval of student activity groups. We have two groups, the Nature Club and the DECA program at the high school.
Second.
Okay, so these are student-led activities, so if they're going to do any fundraising, we have to board approve them so that we can create the cost centers. And the DECA program, I'm really excited about. I'm excited about both clubs, but the DECA program is something that is really oriented to entrepreneurial spirit and business acumen. And I think that will be a great complement to some of the high school programming that we already have in place. So excited about that.
If there's a way to provide feedback, and maybe I should reach out to myself, to Mrs. Gurney, to thank her for kind of starting this, which is a great organization, national in scope, that has many other chapters. I hope there's ways that we can really engage the Granville community there, because some of the things that that group stands for in terms of entrepreneurship and business are things that resonate with a lot of people in the community. So the more that we can get that expertise into our schools, I think the more that the kids will benefit from it.
Yeah,
So
and that's
we can pass
Grace.
that along.
That's Grace Siebel.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Amanda's the nature club.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, good. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Mrs. Siebel.
Yes.
So if you could pass that information along, and I will try to make an effort to reach out myself as well,
Absolutely.
to thank her for starting that initiative.
Will do.
I have a question. Is there a difference, or what is the difference between being a liaison and an advisor
Okay.
to a
Yeah.
club or
So,
organization?
when you are an advisor, there's typically a supplemental associated with that within the collective bargaining agreement. A liaison is just a staff liaison to facilitate the student work.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a paid stipend by the organization. And DECA is a little bit unique because it's also associated with the ESC and CTEC, thank you. So CTEC's also, Grace Siebel is CTEC's teacher, who teaches financial literacy for us. So that's another good relationship with that.
That's good. Any more questions?
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Okay, next is the consent agenda, 1.01A through C5.
So moved.
Second.
Cecile. All right, so we have our typical items. We have a donation from the Granville Athletic Booster for the ticket scanners, which is fantastic. We have some supplementals that we're approving. Obviously, we continue to add more substitute teachers to our list. Thank you, Tanya, for doing that. We have a couple of resignations of some positions, leaves of absences, and then some home instructors. So very typical items in the consent agenda.
So the ticket scanners working pretty well and things like that, or like we think?
I was just gonna say, I took tickets last week. These work a lot better than the old names previous.
Yes. Do they need a cell connection too, so that you can?
They can work off a hotspot, and they're working. Every once in a while, there's challenges because of topography or whatever, but they're working very well.
And we appreciate it from a financial perspective, not having to deal with cash.
Yeah.
Is a great advancement, so.
And
Still quite a few people that would like a ticket.
Well, also, they want the physical ticket or they would like to pay cash?
They like to pay cash.
Okay, so can you just talk, there might be someone who lives in my house like that, so can you about why it's so great to not have to use cash?
Yes, so especially at, say, a football game, it is especially great because we are dealing with volunteers who take the cash, who may not have training on proper protocol for handling cash, checks and balances, securing the cash, depositing the cash. So it's a lot of opportunity for misplacement of cash or other things to go wrong with cash. Human error, just lots of things that could go wrong. So it's just very nice for it to be electronic. There's nothing to worry about, less burden, I think, on volunteers.
Yeah.
And great from an audit perspective. And I believe most all Licking County is using hometown ticketing.
Some are
also-
still allowing cash
Some
payments.
allow
Yeah.
some cash payments.
And we still are doing cash payments at the concession stand, but they also do have the cube too, if you.
And I think we're At the gate, do we have a card reader?
Yes,
Or getting
and
a
it
card
worked.
reader?
They did get a card reader, and it worked very well on Friday night.
And that's new as of last week.
Right,
Yeah.
we had some hiccups at the first couple.
And Mrs. Whittington did an outstanding job because I had no idea how it worked, and she took care of that. So, no, it worked out. There was a nice little system that people, maybe 2 people waited in line to use the card reader, and it worked out very well. Worked out very well.
Yeah, taking credit cards at the concession stand worked well. There's also a Venmo at the credit card stand that you can use, right? So you can pay for your food by Venmo at any one of the booths.
Concession stand?
At the concession stand, yeah. It's a little sketchy because there's not great cell phone connection, right? And so anything can be done for like Wi-Fi hotspot connectivity or something like that out in the stadium. I don't know exactly what that might involve or whatever, but I've heard a lot of community members mention how, that'd be great, right? And I think as more and more people transition to cashless transactions, connectivity is going to be key. And like I said, there's a lot of funds floating around, in the ticket booth, right? With the kind of numbers that we're getting with our new stadium. I'm really impressed with how many folks are showing up, and the revenue from that is significant. What have our numbers been for attendance these last couple of weeks?
So I would say the first game of the year against Clear Fork, we had $16,000 of paid revenue. And the concession stand obviously did extremely well that evening. I don't know that I had a report on the actual totals. We've been doing pretty well at all of our games as far as ticket totals. So it's been an up year, which is great. And all that helps fund all the other athletic programs that we offer too. So obviously the athletic complex, the more that we host in that facility, the better off we are. So continuing to.
It's just great to see so many people out and enjoying that facility for all the different sporting events that are there and things. I'm also surprised how much activity we've gotten there, right? And I'm not sure if it's that, but just people are excited to get back out, right? These last couple of years have been pretty constraining in a lot of ways. And so coming back out and being out on a beautiful Friday night with friends and watching the kids play is really a pleasure. So that was all on that. Anything else on the...
And the band, Cecile.
And the band.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the band.
Let me get started with that.
The flutes in particular.
That's right.
Probably the best section, I'm just saying.
Right out.
We take the roll?
Yeah, I think so. If there's no more questions, the roll on the consent agenda.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, item 12.01, approval of the August 2022 financial report. So moved.
Second.
Yeah, thanks for those graphics that you're building there as well. It's a really good way to think about these cycles that we're faced with, so I appreciate that.
Any additional questions or comments on the financial report?
No?
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Okay, item 12.02, approval of the permanent appropriation resolution for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, this is, so if you recall in June, we approved the temporary appropriations for this fiscal year, and then before October 1st, we have to approve the permanent appropriations. Just gives us time to finalize any changes that may have occurred. And we received a safety grant that is around $90,000.
$99.
Around $90,000 for some safety needs that have been identified by each building, and we're applying for another round for next year as well. So we need to increase the appropriations for that. That's the only material change.
Did we get that already? Like, did that go into buying the alarms for the new GES kindergarten area?
We did get it, it did not go towards that, but we did use the Attorney General Safety Grant Fund that we get annually, which is like 13,000,
13 to 15,000, yeah. What year is 13?
We use that for that project. These funds we did receive, but these funds are federal, so we have to get multiple quotes and go through more of a procurement process for that. But we have the funds, we are working on the quotes, but those things, as we know, take time.
And the ability to take advantage of things like these grants that come up also goes back to the fact that this is long-term planning. You know, we have a safety committee that's a standing committee composed of, you know, our support organizations and the parents and community members and the police and fire department and so forth. So the fact that we've got those long-term plans, we understand what the needs are, we can more easily slot into grants as they come up.
Yep.
And it makes me feel great about those kinds of things that we're making those improvements with our school. So, anything else on the appropriation resolution?
I just have one question about grants. Who applies for the grants? Who does the writing for that?
So that particular one was Tanya for the safety grant. She worked with the building safety committees to identify their needs and submit that application.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I've written an application for a grant and I got approved, so I'm happy to help where I can.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great, the roll please.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Second.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. O'Day?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye. Thank you all for coming.
See you guys tomorrow.